H, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for visiting.
Well, thank you. I'm Tim Mayer. You know that. The viewers might not. You and I have been friends for 35 years. We are doing this because you have a glioblastoma multiforme,
Yes.
which is an aggressive form of brain cancer, and we're talking about this concept of being struck by lightning. It's not something that you did on purpose, and it's come and hit your life. And we're just kind of going through the journey. We're talking about the journey of having discovered you have this disease, that you then have gone through this surgery that we talked about last time. And I should mention for people that, as we are talking this morning, you're in the midst of going through a study with medication. So from time to time, you might wave your hand and take a moment, because that's one of the functions of this. So people shouldn't worry if that's the case, because you and I have talked about that. What I want to talk about is you've come out of the first surgery reasonably well. Some visual disturbance or some function issues on vision, but you're going through the recuperation stage on that. And how long did that stage last?
So I never got back to baseline, but I was pretty functional within 3 or 4 weeks. And at 6 weeks, a lot of the restrictions on my activity were lifted. We've talked about, like, the biggest restriction is if you have a seizure, you're pretty much on a 6-month hold as they're watching you to see, oh, okay, are you going to have a seizure again? Let's not have you doing something that could be really bad to have happen. But the surgical restriction was about 6 weeks. And then, I'm riding a mountain bike around town, going to the gym, working out, very much experimenting with, like, okay, how much can life be like it was before? And interesting enough, like, taking public transit into the hospital. I have a great crew of friends at work that I would do stuff in New York and then take a train across to Newark, where my office was, have lunch with the crew there, and find my way home and do things like that all the time.
So we should mention that you at the time were a senior FBI agent.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the disease, you ended up on a sort of leave of absence, but you were on a pathway at that point towards mandatory retirement.
Yes, we're 57 and out, so I was aging out.
Right. But you're in that stage of your career where you're trying to pass on the knowledge. So being able to go into the office and have a cup of coffee and talk about what's going on is actually kind of part of the plan.
Oh, yeah. No, what was nice is, so I had, we have very generous sick leave. I accrue a lot of sick leave, and functionally it's our short-term disability. So I spent the last 6 months before I retired on terminal sick leave. So, I was getting my paycheck. I still had my credentials. I was restricting, basically I self-restricted I wasn't doing any enforcement activities and stuff like that. Because again, it was like, okay, let's not suddenly be in a position to put anybody else at risk. And I shouldn't be driving vehicles, things like that. Anything that we control the timeline with was like, oh, this I can do something with, because we need to pause. It'll be great. uh, and a lot of time spent like, okay, I'm going to leave. What all do I need to pass on, and how quickly can I get this sorted out? Um, and it was a great exercise in Frank Stella is the man who ended up filling in for me when I went out. Frank was not planning on being an acting boss, and he got it with both barrels. I called him up like, "Hey, I'm not going to be in on Monday. You're going to have to cover."
Or
And he
Tuesday.
rose to the occasion. Did a great job.
And do you do you feel like keeping that active connection, which by the way you've done to this day? I mean, you're not an active agent, but you are uh, going down and doing some training
Oh yeah.
at Quantico and teaching new agents and stuff and
Mhm.
passing on. Has that helped you?
Oh yeah. So um, a lot of what I would be most upset to lose is my sense of self. And I wouldn't recommend people wrap too much of their self worth up in their employment. Uh, I've always had fun employment, and a lot of my self worth has been like, oh, okay, I can do jobs like this. So to be able to keep a toe in the water anywhere around the jobs has been great. It's kind of funny. My good friend Katie keeps asking me to come out and act as a medic on SWAT jobs for him.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's like, Katie, I am not getting up at 2 a.m. to go watch the guys yell at a house. That's not that's just not in the cards at this point. And it is entirely like she is aware, like, hey, I'll get a kick out of it. The guys will get a kick out of it, but it's just like, yeah, it's starting to run out of gas.
Well, but you also talked to me before your diagnosis, before any of
Mhm.
this, that there was a runway anyway of, okay, I've got to start disengaging from this identity as a
Oh
FBI
yeah.
agent and realize that I'm going to face mandatory retirement here. And whether, I mean, and you could have extended it a little bit, and there's some things you could have done, but but I find in my work in motorsport, the most satisfying thing that I can do is to train the next
Yeah.
generation of people. That's always been the most fun I've ever had. And you continue to go down from time to time down to Quantico to go train people and pass on this knowledge.
No, it's filling the what's the purpose?
Yeah.
You know, Part of the purpose right now is just being a good husband and a good family man. Uh, but for a long time, a lot of the purpose was wrapped up in profession.
Yeah.
So being able to dip into that some uh, after a year of dealing with illness, being much more realistic about like, it's like, okay, is this filling purpose or is this just satisfying ego? That I can go places and still have access to things. And it's like, okay, let's make sure you're actually bringing value rather than just occupying a seat here.
Yeah, um, but I do think that the occupations that you've chosen to do, first as a paramedic and then um, as an FBI agent, as a public servant throughout, um, and as a flight medic and all these kinds of things, you have, I mean, ego is part of it, but you have to sort of, it has to be wrapped up in your identity somewhat, or else you're not going to be effective
Right.
at that. You've got to be a believer, as it were, in that. And I think part of what is interesting about the disease and the progression that you're going through, and you talked about this a little bit last time, is that you want to make sure that every day when you wake up, or particularly after you wake up after a surgery, that I am still H Gulick. I am still the person that I know and recognize and want others to recognize. And that self sense of identity is really important.
Oh yeah. No,
I know that that wasn't exactly a question, but I mean, it's
No, I hope I hope when that gets dinged up, I have the humility to be graceful about it. That, oh, okay, I'm not that anymore. Um, we have a professional challenge with uh retired, soon to be retired, semi-retired dudes and dudettes who used to be's and are not necessarily acknowledging that, like, okay, yeah, there was a chapter in the book when you were X. Um, it takes a lot to maintain being X for some of these things. And when you're like, hey, that was 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, or that was 20 years ago, and 20 years ago, X wasn't quite what you thought it was anyway. It becomes a little challenging to deal with these folks who are still in the mix a little bit.
yep.
That uh, it's hardly that they have no value, but there is sometimes a disconnect between the value they perceive and the perspective they're looking at things from. Pardon me, and what the problem is you're trying to solve in the moment.
So
um,
so bringing this back to recovery and then living life. One of the things about this disease is, generally speaking, it doesn't go away.
right.
So you're sort of waiting for the next shoe to drop. You've told me that you sort of live between scans, which happen every couple of months. You go in and you get an MRI and they take a look and see, has this come back? What's going on? So after that first surgery, uh, how did you adjust to that pace, that rhythm of, okay, my identity now includes this cycle of checking and checking again, and how does that affect you? How does that affect family life?
Um, eh, well, like I said, Bill, a lot of experimenting and finding out what limits were. Um, Ironically, so I got done with my first surgery, and then I got put on a chemotherapy drug called Temedar and radiation protocol. The Temedar, the chemotherapy drug, tries to be toxic to the cancer cells. Somewhat mixed success with that over the years. That's been a baseline therapy for about 20 years. And then the radiation is a lot of people have heard advertisements for CyberKnife or plasma surgery. They're variations of, okay, high energy X-ray, hopefully focus right where the cells are to cook stuff out of your head. So I did a month and a half of that. Uh, and ironically ended up losing some hair, not because of chemotherapy drugs, but just because they were shooting an X-ray beam at my head and melted the hair off one side of my head. Uh, and had pretty good success with that, but not perfect success. That, okay. And again, on about a 2-month cycle. So 2 months after my first surgery, was kind of going through life knowing things weren't quite great because of symptoms. Uh, but you don't have the luxury of knowing what normal is. So is this how I'm supposed to feel? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, they put some stuff in your head and stirred around and
Oh
cut
yeah.
some stuff out, and what are you supposed to feel like?
Oh yeah, and I had a really impressive set of staples up the back of my head. I did have good fun. I printed off a temporary tattoo of the Terminator data port to put next to the staples on the bald part. Um, but again, it's kind of like a recurring struggle I've had has been, hey, is this how I'm supposed to be feeling, or is this a problem?
Mm.
Uh, and it's kind of funny because the crew is usually, you could just tell us how you feel and we'll offer an opinion. And it's like, okay, that's probably a good idea. Um, but about 2 months after the first surgery, I had another scan, and they're like, "Oh, you have stuff going on in there." And the mystery is it new tumor growth, which is perfectly plausible because it's a very aggressive thing, or is it necrosis from where the radiation has burned out, has done what's supposed to, has burned out the cancer cells, and it's just dead cancer cells in there that your body hasn't reabsorbed. And the only problem is, since it's a closed vessel, you start dealing with all of the increased intracranial pressure stuff. Um, so uh, after my first surgery, I had a couple weeks of sort of feeling chipper, and then several weeks of feeling perfectly mediocre, but not disabled. Not like,
Right.
oh, okay, I have a problem. I'm just kind of like, I wish I felt better. Um, and there's just
Well,
side effect from the
and a
drugs.
side effect of chemotherapy, a well-known side
Right.
effect is feeling less than great.
Yeah. Uh, Ironically, I did pretty good for about 4 months of maintaining a physical fitness program. Not very aggressive, but like, uh, again, movement is therapy, and just getting on a stationary bike and spinning the pedals for 30 minutes, uh, really pretty good for me. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to win any races, but it is keeping me showing up to the races at least. Um,
Well, but you and Elizabeth have been involved in CrossFit for a long time and
yeah,
been
it's
pretty
it's a
aggressive
fitness
and
household. Yep.
yeah, yeah, and your son Will is
Yeah, he
a
crushes it.
fit, crushes it,
Yep.
and yep, Grace is less enthusiastic about that, but she's certainly
She's
fit.
she's doing her volleyball. She's having good fun.
Yep.
No, but it makes it easier. Like, you're not the weirdo in the household when you like, hey, I'm going to go get on the bike for half an hour. No, and not that anyone has extorted me into working out, but every now and then there has been a, "Are you doing any exercise today?" Yes, a little bit. Um, and what was nice is early on I wasn't as worn down. So it was easy just to rally the emotional strength of like, oh, okay, I'm going to practice balancing for 15 minutes or whatever it was going to be. Um, Fast forward into the second year of this, it's sometimes a little hard for me to find like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I really feel like doing that today. Um, but let's see. So that took me, where do we get to with this? This was, I'd had my
So
first surgery.
you're
I
about
was
2 months
recovering from that.
into chemo, and yep.
Yep. Um, and then I had the experience, my first experience of them coming back and with the, okay, you've had a bad scan. Uh, and that's part of the journey with us is like, you're going to have scans that are, it's fine, or it's bad. That's kind of the two ways it goes. Um, God love this crew that takes care of me, because I think they have that conversation with somebody every week when they go to work.
Mm.
That like, hey, you've had a bad scan. Um, and then we start playing the, well, what does that mean game? Uh, in my case, that meant I was going to go back for another surgery. Uh, I was kind of riding on, hey, first surgery went pretty good. I didn't have any mishap and seemed like I could tolerate it well. And then I was just back to, I remember being really scared the first time. I'm not sure I want to go through that again. Uh, but at any rate,
But your options then are to say thanks but no thanks,
oh yeah,
and and then the stopwatch starts, or say okay, I'm let's get into this.
yeah. One of the frustrating things is like they have a decent sample size of patients, but it is so everyone's individual response to the therapy is an individual response to the therapy they're very challenged coming up with, hey, this will do X with you. It's entirely like, hey, we hope, we think it's reasonable to believe, our experience has been. Um, uh, the, in my case, it was the surgeons were like, well, actually, we got in and out of you last time without too much trouble. We think it would be easy to do it again. And then they jokingly mentioned, well, there's already a hatch there we can use again. It's like,
Okay.
okay, that was kind of funny.
Hmm.
um,
Yep.
uh, and bottom line up front, the second surgery, I woke up and despite a hiccup in my surgery we can talk about, I almost immediately noticed I felt better than I had in weeks. That they had decompressed the pressure in my head, and I was just like, okay. I
Yep.
feel like I'm almost back to pre-illness baseline and had uh regarding the in my head part of the surgery, recovered from that remarkably quickly and was like, oh man, this was the bomb. This, to me, it felt like this fixed everything. Um, I keep alluding to, I had a little bit of a problem. I ended up with my leg unintentionally pinched against the hospital bed when they turned me over and ended up with something called rhabdomyolysis just from having a muscle crushed for too long. Um, which can be a big deal. It can absolutely endanger your kidneys if they don't manage it well. Um, and I really wasn't interested in being on a dialysis machine with everything else that was going on in my life.
Yeah.
But they took fine care of me. Uh, Probably should have been a better listener. I was like, okay, I'm going to drink all the water I can, and I'm going to start walking around to flush this all out. And rhabdomyolysis is basically broken down muscle cells in your bloodstream that can clog your kidneys. So being the smart ass that I was like, okay, I'll just keep drinking fluid and I'll try walking around. Um, Kind of overlooking the fact of how damaged my hip muscle was. So when I was trying to stretch it out one day and then had an unobserved fall in the hospital, that the nurse would have been furious at me. We're like, why did you not just stay in the bed like I told you? um, but that is basically a soft tissue orthopedic injury that 6 weeks later was fine, and I
Yep.
cleared the rhabdo. But again, like they went and scooped out the gray sludge in my head, and I was like, oh, could we have done that sooner? I feel great. And suddenly, like the world opened up to me again. Like suddenly driving 6 hours to Virginia, no problem. It's like I'm perfectly comfortable doing that. And that
When
surgery has
was
carried me.
when was the pirate patch?
Oh,
That
so
was
that
before
was
this?
yes, that was leading up to. Um, so that was after first surgery, leading up to second, and as the pressure kept building up in my head from just cancer cells dying from the radiation and everything else, uh, it started squeezing that part of my brain and the nerve from my eyeball back that sends the signal. And the eye patch was fantastic just for like, okay, let's cut down on 50% of the signal. Um, and it was really kind of funny because I had gone into an appointment, and I guess I must have been sitting there talking to my nurse doing one of these, and she's like, "You look really uncomfortable." And I'm just like, "Well, it's better when I do this." And they gave me permission to wear an eye patch. Yeah, they recommended I wear an eye patch.
Yep.
Uh, and like the moment I put it on, I was like, "Oh, this is the bomb. This works great." And then the secondary effect was I no longer had an invisible handicap. You know, I,
Right.
I, I had, some dude shows up wearing an eye patch. Either they have a very strange sense of fashion, or you get something's going on. And it made a lot
Well,
of
at that point, I mean, because you and I did some FaceTiming at that point. At that point, you had the the burn hair
yeah.
thing going on. You had the eye patch going on. So yeah, it was quite and the eye patch made you look like Long John Silver, the pirate. I mean, there
It
was a
was a
lot.
look.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
Yeah, I actually I appreciated there was a social advantage to the eye patch that people would get. Oh, okay, this guy's got something going on, and then it was an easy bridge to explaining, like, oh, hey, yeah, I've had some surgery in my head. The other thing that was interesting is I was bumping into people who had not heard I was ill, who knew me. I would go to events. We had a coworker pass away, so I'm at the services for that, and I'm bumping into people, and they're like, "You hurt your eye," things like that, and it became socially awkward because it was always kind of like, "Hey, have they gotten the word?" And you're trying not to blow people up with like, "Well, no, yeah, I've got cancer. A lot of people don't survive." It's like you do need to workshop how you start saying that to people. It's like, okay, let's try and be nice about this. Um, because it is not their problem. It is my problem. Uh, but suddenly you can create a problem for other people who may not have been prepared or equipped to deal with something emotionally sensitive in that moment. That it's like, okay, let's have some grace about this. And interestingly enough, the more those people care about you, the more emotionally charged it is. It was a little easier to
Yeah,
tell acquaintances rather than friends. Um,
yeah.
but it was funny because you sort of have this assumption everybody knows, and even now I'll run into somebody who through no fault they're just like not on the distro list. And I'll get the, hey, what's been going on? And
Yeah.
I will remind myself to take a breath and like, okay, let's walk down the hill here. let's not let's not drop a ton of bricks on somebody who's just trying to be nice.
Did you find that there were, and I'm more interested in family than I am about acquaintances and so on, but did you find that there were, you, with your training, with your background in emergency medicine and so on, that you were well equipped to have those two different kinds of conversations, one of which where you could just lay it out and one where you needed to sort of lead into it a bit, and who did you decide to, how did you decide this person I need to help through this?
So I was kind of lucky because pretty early I decided to be completely transparent about it. Um, because every now and then people will ask some probing questions about like, hey, how much are you going to talk about this? Is this an okay topic? And pretty early on, my shtick was like, no, I'm talking about this and I'm being perfectly open about it. And interestingly enough, some of the EMS crowd, like I have had flat out people ask, so you're dying, right? That has been a question I have fielded. And
Okay.
the person who asked me, like, completely valid and not a malicious question. Like that fits the nature of the relationship with this person and where they work. And really was just like, okay, we can cut to it. And like, yes, this illness shortens everybody's lifespan. Now, am I going to drop dead in front of you? Pretty unlikely. We're going to make it through lunch. But it did start coming up with like, no, hey, I'm not taking a job that means, hey, are you interested in doing X? And I'm like, hey, I really can't. I'm not sure if I'm going to be a good employee for you in 6 or 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, if I'm saying yes to the job, I'm saying yes to the job with the expectation I'm going to be able to do the job and not be a problem for you. So there were those conversations going on. But it was a good exercise in my emotional intelligence of like, hey, this person probably cares about you. This is not what they want to hear from you. You do need to tell them, but like
I think
let's be nice.
how did that conversation go with your parents?
Uh, a
I mean,
little
bearing
abrupt.
in, I mean, let's lay a couple things out for people.
Yeah.
Your mother, Nancy, recently passed away. She had
Yep.
gone through a 5-year battle with cancer herself,
Hmm.
ovarian cancer. And, but a year ago when you were starting this journey, she was there with you. Your father is an incredibly intelligent man, but is somewhat elderly,
Hmm.
um, and has been fighting this battle with alongside Nancy and so on. But he's I don't know that he's the most up to speed on medical kinds of issues and those kinds of things. So in that context, um, how'd that conversation go?
Uh, it's never cool giving people bad news. But it's also never cool being unrealistic about bad news. Um, in very German household, uh, you know, a bias towards stoicism. Uh, and interestingly enough, my mom's illness had pretty radically changed her lifestyle
Hmm.
from being wildly active, skiing the whole mountain to like that just not being available to her. And interestingly enough, she put as much energy into her social circle as she did into her outdoor activity when that went away. And it was kind of I'm kind of happy I had a chance to see that because like that's not exactly my bias. It's like I I delight in the company of all my friends, but I am not a I'll meet you at the pub guy. So it was really kind of it was a good lesson to see mom like, oh, I'm going to learn to play canasta, a card game that still mystifies me. And suddenly she had her canasta click, and like 3 times a week she was having she was socializing with the ladies having their canasta game, and I'm like, okay, that is a good idea. Those are good things. Um, my parents my parents started, particularly my mom, who had kind of resigned herself to her illness, struggled somewhat with the thought that I might pass before she did, and she struggled with that.
Hmm.
Um, my dad gets frustrated by the helplessness, and I think everybody involved in this struggles with the helplessness. Uh, it was kind of funny that there was sometimes unspoken, sometimes spoken. Well, when are people planning on doing X? Like, hey, there's this clock in the background. It's like, yeah, but I don't know how much time is on the clock. My mom became a hospice patient in the last few months of her life. And a reminder to, hey, whatever someone says to you is usually meant with the best of intention. But as my mom, we were meeting hospice nurses and the staff and finding out how that whole mechanism works. And my mom's there, you should pay attention to this. You're going to need to know how all this works. And I was like, well, yes, you are absolutely correct, mom. I appreciate your pragmatism.
Um, we were talking about Hank and how Hank has frustration.
Yeah, well, um, I don't blame him. I mean, like, you know, you wish the world for your children. Uh, there is no more feeling of helplessness when your children are ill and you're powerless to affect the outcome. Uh, I have a lot of empathy for the guy. Um, and fortunately, he's been nothing but loving about it. If he's angry, he has kept it to himself. One of the problems with anger as an emotion is that, like, hey, all the feelings might be valid, but anger has a way of suddenly going in the wrong direction, and you end up sharing it with the people who didn't deserve it under bad circumstance. Um, and Hank won't mind me mentioning, like, he is beginning to suffer from some of the dementia from aging, that his world is getting smaller as well. That, he's like, he does not drive himself. He has a very loving caregiver who's minding after him and helping him get through life. But, like, frankly, his world is a little smaller, and now it's turned into, okay, I'm having lunch with the guys on Wednesdays. What's going on? Um, and I think he has come to grips with he's a passenger on the train,
Hmm.
and uh, and for a lot of things in life, you do just become a passenger on the train. Um, and I think both of us are making a point of, when there's an opportunity to visit and spend some time together, that's usually the right answer. It's like,
Yeah.
particularly
You
if we're
know,
genuinely visiting rather than just in the same place at the same time.
I for a lot of years suffered from anxiety getting on airplanes.
Okay.
Not because I was s- scared of flying. I was actually scared of crashing. um,
That actually is
and
logical.
yeah, no. But it's entirely illogical when you realize that how much I have flown in my life, and survived it just fine. And I've gotten over this, and I'm not sure. Well, I actually do know how I got over it. And I'll mention that in a minute. But I think one of the things that for a lot of people who have fear of something, whatever it might be, or who get angry about something, a lot of it has to do with it being out of their control. So, I would have been perfectly happy if I was able to fly in the cockpit.
Right.
But being in the back, not being able to look at the forward window, but having to look out the side wasn't working for me. And I think the analogy that I'm trying to draw here is, I think it's remarkable that, given, you're talking about passenger on the train, well, passenger on the plane, same thing,
Mhm.
that feeling of, this is going off the rails, or I'm in turbulence and I don't have control over this. I mean, anger is a pretty valid reaction to that.
It's valid. But uh, it is so easy for that to turn into mean. And, you're lashing out at people. If you want to just be completely transactional about it, okay, you're lashing out at the people that you need on your side.
Mm.
Let's not fire them up too much. And then let's remember the part that, like, okay, as much as we all like to assign fault, it's like, this is not their fault. You know, um, I think many of us go through life like, okay, whose fault is this? I've been afforded the opportunities so and so has. They've gotten more. They've got more of their share than I did. It's like, yeah, that's really not exactly how the world works. Sometimes it just is.
And it is, I mean, you've at least said to me that you're not spending much time angry, but I assume you
Not
are.
much.
Yeah.
Well,
How do you talk yourself out of that anger, or how do you? I mean, because I don't know that I can imagine not having some anger at
uh,
not being able to manage this, and
right.
as you rightly say, that anger is going to spill over to other people, and how do you manage that?
Um, whether I'm angry or not is not actually changing the problem. I do try to remind myself of, sure, you can be angry, you can be self-pitying. Uh, Let me say that in a nicer way. You can actually appreciate, take the time to appreciate what a poor hand you've been dealt. You know, uh, because I do want to leave. It's very easy for me to start saying things that are going to sound that people are going to take as being very judgmental of folks who, for whatever reason, uh, are not working as actively to be gentle on the audience. There is no obligation to be gentle on the audience. It's like, yes, if you are ill, you have a problem. It's like you, you can feel bad about having a problem. Um, I have spent a whole lifetime of seeing people who suddenly that they had a problem and they felt bad. They felt empowered to make it everybody else's problem, and that is socially unacceptable. It's like, yeah, no, that's not the way we're going to be. Um, in exchange for just being like, okay, I'm angry, but me being angry or not is not moving the needle. And uh, my quality of life and the quality of life for my family and everyone around me will be so much better if that anger has a context. It's like that. Okay, this isn't cool, but there's no one to blame. Me lashing out. The other thing is, I'm too old to be lashing out like a seventh grader. It's like, uh, I have to admit, this is taking a few pegs off of my tolerance for some things. And I do embrace clarity as a kindness. And
Hmm.
it is kind of funny because every now and then some of the conversations with Elizabeth have gotten a little bit more like, well, what's going on? It's like, well, I'm annoyed. And she will be nice enough to give me the opening and ask, well, what are you annoyed about? I'm like, since you asked, I am annoyed about X. Uh, and those conversations go much, much better than me just demonstrating that I'm annoyed and being a seventh grader and, taking the little stabs. It's like, okay, let's actually give voice to what this problem is. And sometimes there are things that can be changed. And sometimes there are things like, hey, you're just going to have to get over that.
Mm.
um, you know, and that was without even having to spend a whole lot of money on therapy.
Well, eh, I think what you're pointing out, or what you've discovered, is that um, that that anger is a valid emotion,
Right.
but it's not the most useful emotion in terms of the payback of that emotion. Like, the payback is generally negative,
Right. Well, it's very easy to chase people away with it. It's very easy to get a lot more anger back than you dished out.
right?
That's not real productive.
Yeah.
You know,
And if you are, um, if you're trying to improve your quality of life in this situation, that um, it's going to be far more productive to try and channel that into kindness, to channel that into talking to people about your illness in a gentle way, as you've said, and I think all those things are. It's a little hard to understand. I'm going to tell you that, because the um the intuitive reaction, the thing that you would intuit is I would be pissed. I'd be really, really, really angry and upset, and a punching bag would be helpful, whether that's a physical one or a member of my family that's going to receive that. That seems natural.
I think you're right. You know, emotionally, this is not fair. Intellectually, hey, I wasn't targeted. No one did this to me.
Mhm.
You know, um, and I have the luxury of I've had, despite some genuine tragedy and some challenge, my life and my family's life has just been a long series of good stories that I feel really fortunate about. So, like, when I'm balancing it out, it's like, okay, uh, it's rare that somebody has a life that is nothing but goodness. That rarely, very few people are fortunate enough for that to happen. Um, and uh, Fortunately, somewhere along the way, like, I did stop to smell the roses and, like, have on many occasions consciously been like, oh my God, this is working out. My life is working out so much better than I ever imagined it would be. I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet, despite having this misfortune. It's like, okay, that makes it a little easier to swallow. Um, and then I started learning that, like, hey, when I pause to have that gratitude for how lucky everything has been, that makes it a lot easier for me to deal with the shitty parts. That, like, okay, yes, of course, I don't wish this on I don't wish this on anyone. I certainly don't wish it on myself. And I you know, wish I wasn't dealing with it. Wish my wife wasn't dealing with it. Um, because much more pleasant problems to deal with is like, oh, okay, how am I going to occupy my time for another decade or decade and a half doing things that give me purpose and things like that. Uh, but yeah, so anger. Yeah, I just fortunately I grew up in a household that, like, you weren't allowed to misbehave like that. So, well, it was like, hey, if you want to be a selfish little prick and claim you're angry, okay, good on you. There's plenty of things to be angry in the world. You can be angry a lot. Uh, and if you're not careful about being angry, you can end up hurting. You can end up hurting the wrong people a lot. And again, just to be purely transactional about it, you're probably going to get it back a lot more than you gave. It's not going to be cool.
I think a lot of families do that, which is to say you're not allowed to have certain things, but to translate that into that's a positive, because there's a function of bottling emotion up
Mm.
that often happens rather than dealing with it in a more positive way. You appear at the moment to be dealing with a set of very powerful emotions in a more positive way. How do I redirect anger to become gratitude? How do I take feeling sorry for myself and realize that's not going to be good for everybody around me? How all those kinds of things. I think the value of this conversation is that redirecting those negatives into a way of handling it in a positive way, which is incredibly rare, is also, a matter of I mean, the word grace comes to my mind. It helps people around you, and we've talked about in previous episodes, you have dealt with in your family, meaning with your kids and with Elizabeth, with depression, with
Mhm.
dangerous emotions, with things that can go off the rails. And so there's maybe some practice there of, okay, how do we handle that in a positive way, or redirect that, or how do we take a shit sandwich and deal with that? I mean, I think that's something that I hope people watching this will sort of take up this not as a given, but as a practice, is something that you've talked about, having to practice breathing to manage stress in a job that is stressful. Okay, how do you, what are the practices that help you navigate through these emotions?
Um, you ever heard of the go to the balcony analogy?
Don't.
It's just sort of a practice of you find yourself in a circumstance, and if you can step outside yourself to try and look at it from the third person perspective, go to the balcony
Mhm.
and try and have some awareness of how what you're conveying into the conversation. But you know, uh, again, like I have always had difficulty. A odd coincidence of being a little socially awkward is also trying to pay a lot of attention in social circumstance to be okay. Can I read social cues and stuff like this? And this is where the practice came up of like, okay, how do you think you're coming across in this conversation or in this moment? Because maybe this conversation is going so badly because of something you're messaging.
I I I think it's funny that you think you're socially awkward, because I've never known you to be that. I have known you to be, let's say, different than
Yeah,
most people, but it's because I think you've always had this sense of self and sense of viewing yourself as others might view you, and have said, okay, well, okay, now I need to take a slightly different tact on this. And
right. Let's dial this down a little bit.
watching you shift gears in conversations or in whatever it is, because you've gone down a pathway and now it's time to back up and go down a
Yeah.
slightly different pathway. I've seen you do that, but that's not that's way less socially awkward than the people that just are determined to drive down whatever that pathway is. And I think where it comes into play here is, this disease is gives you all kinds of opportunities to drive down blind alleys and emotionally, and and just I mean, you've talked about being kind to other people in these conversations. Well, I mean, you could, just for the hell of it, be one of those people that's just like, you know what? Screw the world. I'm angry, so I'm going to absolutely make sure that everybody else is as miserable as they
Oh yeah.
possibly can be, to share my
Right. To
sense of
dilute it.
anger. Right.
Yes. um, I'm going to be judged by how I'm remembered. It's like,
Mm,
hopefully, I will be remembered fondly. um,
well,
and also, I'm also going to be judged by how my kids and the people I influence behaved. They're like, okay, hopefully, they're taking the right lessons from me.
how uh, Will and Grace are they're in their early 20s, mid
Mhm.
Will's mid 20s, Grace's early 20s. That is, I think, a very impressionable. A lot of change happens right there. They go from being, you know, college students to adults. Um, Not that some college students aren't adults. I don't want to give that impression, but but a lot of change happening.
Hmm.
What's going on there?
Well, interestingly enough, so Will is following. He's flattering me by following my career path. So he works as a paramedic full time. Um, and uh, it's very flattering watching him. I see him practicing lessons I've spouted. Uh,
He
Grace
he
is.
he has thought enough of your lessons that he assembled this book.
He was nice enough to compile
Yeah.
those.
Of This is called Leader Tools, assembled by Will Gulick. And it's got all kinds of your various sayings and slogans and things that you've done and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's a pretty significant piece of flattery right there.
Uh, he really knocked it out of the park with that one.
Yep.
Grace is doing a great job of. She is demonstrating how to enjoy having all the feels, and while coming up through a STEM curriculum and computer science stuff, watching her like, oh, I like art and pottery and things like that, and creating things. I'm a little jealous how she accesses that better than I do. I'm like, wish I had a little bit more of a flair for that. But uh, uh, storms have a way of making for good sailors. So I think this prepares them for life a little better. I wish the lessons weren't quite as harsh, but you know, again, I like that. I've got nice kids who are pleasant to be around, who I'm proud of. I'm like, oh, everyone should be so lucky.
Right.
Um, Will is a little ahead of Grace in adulthood. Like, he's engaged to a young woman who is a rock star, and the two are good for each other. I'm like, okay, nothing for me to worry about there. They're going to be great. Again, everyone should be so lucky. It's not,
Right.
it's not always so simple for folks. So,
Hmm. And does that d- does that give you a sense of comfort?
oh yeah. Well, so my okay. Uh, my biggest concern is how my family copes with me dying. Uh, they will succeed and they'll deal with it. I don't think it's going to be cool. And I am uncomfortable even spending a whole lot of time thinking about it because it's
Hmm.
easy for me to imagine how difficult it will be. Um, and I don't like when I imagine how unhappy. Uh, that if there was one part of this that I wish I could cut out of the whole scenario, oh, it's that hands down.
Hmm.
Um, Now, uh, you know, there's every reason to believe I'm around for a while. So I'm like, okay, what can we do to try and set everybody up for success? And like, you do get to the point, like, there's really not that much to be done other than make sure the now time is good. It's like, okay, is sooner or later, you do get to the next chapter of the book, whether you want the book to wrap up or not. And that is something I lose sleep over. It's like,
Hmm.
wow, I wish this would be easier on them. Um, and I appreciate that they don't pretend everything is going to be hunky dory, because I think I would feel somewhat devalued if that was the shtick.
Yeah, it'll be fine. No worries.
It'll be fine. Yeah, we won't miss you.
Mm.
They don't do that to me. But again, like it's like this is just rough for everybody involved. Like there's just no two ways about that. Um, I'm trying to embrace like, hey, I got as much out of my turn as I could, so I don't need a lot of pity. Yeah. I did have actually I have to chuckle. I have one remarkably socially awkward friend who genuinely he is probably undiagnosed on spectrum. And has been a friend for years and years and years and years. And he commented, like, I told him what was going on. He's in the healthcare field. Like, he knew exactly what the score is. And remarkably succinctly, he's like, oh, well, you've lived a really good life. And like, thank God I know exactly who this guy is, because that might be something I might not have taken well from someone that I didn't quite get where he was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
He could not have been more generous making that statement. Like he genuinely was like, oh, okay, if someone's going to be in this position, you've squeezed most of the juice out of the lemons here. But it was a entertaining moment, and like, oh, okay, this is how some of these conversations are going to go.
I think this is a good moment to wrap this up. I know earlier you went and took a pill to take care of a migraine that was beginning to
Yep.
approach, and I really appreciate you sharing some of this stuff. I think what's really valuable in these conversations, not least for me, is that you are somebody who has been very much identified as the FBI guy, the guy who's got the ego and riding around on the helicopter and doing all this stuff. And I think it's valuable for people to understand that everybody has these emotions.
Oh yeah,
Whether they choose to bottle them up and not express them, or whether they hide them, or whatever that might be. A lot of people feel like having emotion about this is a not valid thing, is embarrassing, or it's that they're being childish or whatever it is, and certainly they may be, all of those things may come along with it, but having the emotion and is valid for everybody. And I just want to thank you for opening up and talking about these, and we'll talk again soon.
Well, once again, thanks for being a loving friend, because this is great for me. Surprise, surprise. It's a lot to deal with, and the exercise of giving voice to it, I'm not sure I could explain exactly why, but it is good for me. So,
H, love you, man.
love you too.